Hi guys, welcome to Coverage Inc.'s first webinar. So before we get started, I just want to go over some housekeeping stuff. First of all, let's make sure you can all hear us. So if everyone could please type something into the chat box like, hello, hi, can hear you, whatever. So please type something into the chat box so we know that you can hear us. Okay, hello, I can hear you. Great, fantastic, excellent. So, if at any point in time you can't hear us anymore, it might be a slight technical glitch. So just try logging out and back in or call in via phone. So let's dive right in with introductions. Hi, I'm Tanya.
What's up, planet Earth? I'm Jim Surreal. How are you guys doing today?
And yeah, so the reason we actually decided to start with webinars is because we had a few rounds of phone calls recently where you guys could ask your burning questions about the business or your career or what steps you should take, etc. And everyone we talked to found that really helpful. So we figured we'll do the same thing in webinar form because that way we can reach a bunch of people all at once. So we'll have two distinct parts to this webinar with Q&As in between. So I'm going to ask you to please hold off on typing your questions into the chat box until you see a Q&A slide, simply because if we're being deluged with questions right now, we might miss a few, and also because your questions may already get answered during the presentation. So let's get started with part one. And the most burning question everyone always seems to have is this question: how do
How
I
do I
score
score
representation?
representation?
Exactly.
Oh
So,
boy.
and even though everyone is muted, I think I can hear the groans from you guys after you read this slide.
Oh,
Yes,
come on. It's easy. This is easy. Come on. What's the big deal, guys?
I
Seriously.
know it's totally easy. But yes, if you have connections, indeed use them. On the other hand, don't do any of these things. That's usually not a very good idea.
By the way, there are people out there who will charge you money and tell you they can get you represented. Managers who live, in Terre Haute, Indiana, or, entertainment attorneys who, for $1,500 will send your screenplay out. These do not work. Don't do it.
Yeah, and now of course we have Chris Farley's abs.
Yeah, Chris. Oh, the late great. Oh, what a shame.
Yeah, so anyway, this is the funny way of saying don't do any of these things. So before we get into how to score representation, let's quickly go through the difference between agents versus managers. Jim, do you want to talk about agents?
Oh, do I really have to? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, you guys probably know all this stuff already, but let's just go through it real quick. Okay. So the difference between agents and managers, there is a difference, although not that much of one. Agents are licensed. They do have to adhere to a certain code of conduct. They have to pay a fee. They cannot produce or attach themselves to projects. That's one of the things that they have to agree to as part of getting licensed. They often represent 50 to 100 clients or more. So if you're talking literary clients, you will probably be one of 50 to 100 persons on that person's roster. If you're a talent client, you could be talking up to 200 people. That's a lot of people for someone to handle. So in other words, you're not going to be getting a ton of time from that agent. Okay. They don't generally do much development or career mentoring. That's not really what agents are about. They're really just about being salespeople for you. Sometimes they do not even read, and this is the real mind blower. Because everybody thinks like, oh, when I get an agent, this person will really help me and establish my career and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, agents really kind of come on board when you're already more established, when you've already got some momentum, when things are already going on. They oftentimes will brag about not ever reading your material. It's just mind-boggling. There are agents in town who do that, and they just depend on their assistants and they depend on coverage, and it's like a point of pride for them. Like, yeah, I don't even read. I swear to God, these guys are out there. Okay. Um, they'll sometimes actively look for work for their clients, but generally speaking, it's more just stuff that falls into their lap. Like they'll have breakfast, lunch, or dinner every single day with different people out in the town, producers or whatever, and studio employees and stuff, and they'll find out about projects and they'll find out about somebody who's looking for a writer on something, and then in their head they'll connect the dots. Oh, I have a client who has a script, something like that, and that's generally how agents find you work when it falls into their lap. They usually don't read query letters ever, with a couple of rare exceptions, which we'll talk about. And again, they're basically just salespeople. That's they're often League educated salespeople, who go to work every day looking sharp and in a suit and tie, and they work very, very hard. But really, that's all they're about, is selling stuff. Tanya, managers on the other hand, you want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, the difference, well, managers are not licensed. So that means, on the one hand, that anybody can hang out a shingle and say, "Hi, I'm a manager." So that means do research these people, but that's easy to do. Just go onto IMDb and check them out. Also, managers can and often do attach themselves to projects, for instance, as producers, because sometimes they package the project, sometimes they take the finished project and take it out to market, try to sell it. So they can and do frequently attach themselves. On the bright side, they have smaller client lists because they have to pay more attention to their clients, because a manager, unlike an agent, is supposed to have a more holistic, long view of your career. In other words, they're going,
Yeah.
yeah, supposedly. In
Yeah.
other words, they do want you to have a career, a long career, and they want to profit from that career. So they also often actively look for new talent. And so that's the good part, because that means you can get in with them a little bit more easily. And often what happens is, I mean, they also want a script that they can sell. So if you have a script they can sell, they're like, yeah, 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 let's meet. Great, this person has a script they can sell. On the other hand, if they like you or they like your voice and they know there is something there, they will also say, well, come in. This script is not marketable, but what other ideas do you have? Give me 10 log lines, and if there is something that I think is marketable, I'm going to encourage you to work on this and bring it to me when it's done.
Yeah, and that's a big difference, by the way, between the agents and managers. Agents don't do that. They're really one and done. If they sign you and they take out something, when that 6-month review comes around, you may be gone. I mean, different agencies have different policies, and it varies from time to time, but agents do tend to be way more cutthroat.
And hence, since managers are more approachable, we usually tell people to focus on
Focus
managers.
on the managers, yes.
Exactly, because also eventually a manager will introduce you to an agent. So, how to get an agent's or manager's attention?
Okay, so let me jump in here. So a lot of this is going to seem like duh, because because it is, but this is the thing that agents do pay attention to, and I do have a video up on our YouTube page, and you can link to it from CoverageInc.com, and basically it's how do I find an agent or a manager, and in it I say you don't an agent or man. I'm sorry, how do you find an agent? You don't. An agent finds you. And what I mean by that is, agents are generally not accessible to emerging writers. They usually come aboard when you've already got some momentum and some heat going on. You've already got a manager. You've already got a producer. There's something happening. You've won a contest or whatever. You querying them is not generally going to get you anywhere. By the way, everything we tell you today, there are exceptions to all of these things. We're just kind of giving you the prevailing wisdom, okay? So how do you get an agent's attention? Well, win the nickel. Duh. Just go ahead and do that, guys. Go win the nickel. Come on. What are you waiting for? Seriously. um, or some other big contest. I mean, there are certain contests that agents do pay attention to, like the nickel, like tracking B. There's a Launchpad, Scriptapalooza, Big Break. I mean, there's a few of them out there that some agents do pay attention to. And in fact, some of the big agencies like UTA and those guys, they have people, assistants whose job it is to track these contests and these significant industry events to keep their ear to the ground for new talent. Okay, so if you do get the validation from winning some big contest, that is something that may get an agent's attention. Okay, you have a film at Sundance or Slamdance or Austin or South by, one of the big festivals. Okay, that's, if you get in there, that's a validation that may make you and your project worth an agent's attention. By the way, we're talking specifically about agents here, because managers, there's a little bit more flexibility. Um, you get great scores on blacklist.com. Now, that generally means you probably need to be in the industry already on some capacity. Someone needs to have sent out your script, a manager or producer generally. And if you don't have an agent already, if you get great scores on Blacklist, they may pay attention. But even if you're not represented and you just, pay the money to post your script on Blacklist, you might get some attention if it's great, if it gets great scores. Your video gets 10 million views on YouTube. Easy, right? I mean, come on, you can do that. Just go do that. Funny or Die, anything like that. That is the magic number, 10 million views. Now, obviously, if you get 200,000 views on something, that's a lot of views, but the industry doesn't care.
And let me just jump in here on how
Yeah,
we arrived at those 10 million, because we've actually been told by
yeah,
our manager panel that 10 million views is the magic number indeed.
yeah. I know that's horrifying,
Yeah.
but it's true. Yeah, no. And in fact, I had a meeting with an executive from oh God, it was a Mace. Oh, I forget. Anyway, but yeah, no, she specifically told me, and when we came into her office for her interview for our meeting, she was sitting there just finishing up watching some videos on YouTube, and this was assigned work for her. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I've got to watch these videos. They're on my list because they all hit 10 million views. There you go. The town is buzzing about you, okay? And you've done something that just, for whatever reason, the town just kind of takes a liking to you. Maybe you've got a great video on Funny or Die. Your project is out there winning some awards in some way, shape, or form. The town is talking about you. You've got an industry friend who the agent trusts, who will advocate for you. That is probably the most powerful thing of all. And who that agent trusts is key to that. If it's just someone the agent kind of knows, the plant guy in the agent's office, But if it's someone they play tennis with, or their assistant who has proven themselves and proven that the agent can trust their taste, yeah, that's important. Okay, you're adapting a work that was successful in another medium. Now that can actually get some attention. No, we're not generally talking like a public domain piece of material from like 400 years ago. They're not really going to care about that. But, let's say it was something else that, attracted some sort of attention in some other way. It could be, for example, something from a novelist's back catalog, an old Harlan Coben novel from 20 years ago or something that never got optioned for some reason, or a Stephen King short story. By the way, Stephen King, well known for being gracious and generous with his back catalog, and has given options to writers, to emerging writers, for next to nothing on some of his short stories in the past. What a guy! And quite a few of them have gotten set up and have sold. Okay. So if you've got an adaptation of a Stephen King piece of material and you got the rights to it, people might pay attention to you. However, just don't go adapt something you don't have the rights to. Please, you have to have the rights to it. And finally, agents will pay attention to something so brilliant that people can see it from 10,000 feet. In other words, if you're an Eskimo, or if you are, living in, Bangladesh or wherever, you do have a chance if your material is brilliant. All these other things notwithstanding, if it's so amazing that people can see it from a mile away, you've got a shot.
All
There
right.
are.
Now, Yeah.
Yep.
Of course, let's also talk about things that agents don't care about, and let's just quickly go through them. Number one, query letters. Now, of course, there are exceptions to every rule. On our last manager panel, one of the managers actually said, "Oh, I recently signed someone off of a query letter." So it happens, but it happens rarely. So it happens when your query letter shows that you have this killer, fresh, new idea that you're presenting in this killer, fresh, new way, or that there's something so interesting about you, they just have to meet you. And let me just throw in here, we have a free query letter service, no upsell, no nothing. You can at any time email us your query letters and we'll get back to you with our feedback on that if
Oh,
you want to.
let me just
So,
let me just clarify real quick. Yep, managers do actually read queries. That's their job. Agents, not so much.
yes, and right now we're talking about agents, hence query letters sometimes work, but not all that often. And if you want input, send them to us. So also what often happens is a writer going, well, I've written 150 scripts. Yeah, that's not going to work.
No
And
one cares.
no one cares. And just don't do any of that. Don't go there.
Nope.
Or, yeah, so I've just had my short film in the Hole in the Wall Film Festival. Again, nobody cares.
Yeah, quick
Um,
anecdote on that topic. So back ages ago, I had a multi-picture deal with Lionsgate, and I did a series of action movies. It was a great experience, working with them. And I thought, wow, I just had three movies made in a row from Lionsgate. I've rewritten a bunch of other stuff that didn't get made. I'm working, I'm making real money. Should be easy to get an agent right now. I did have a manager, but at that time, I didn't have an agent. Nobody cared. They didn't care because these movies were not hitting the Hollywood radar. They were low budget action movies, $2 million action movies. Yep, agents didn't care.
and the other thing agents don't care about is festival awards. Like, again, if it's the Hole in the Wall festival or the Hole in the Wall contest, yeah, they simply don't care other than the ones we've already mentioned, Nickel or Tracking B or Scriptapalooza. And also a lot of people often think they're building their resume, quote unquote, by scoring into the semifinals or the quarterfinals of a contest. Not really. It doesn't work that way. Basically, the way an agent sees this is, oh, well, they're on their way, but they're not quite there yet. So I'm going to wait until they're actually there.
Yeah, they just don't care. So how people do get agents? Okay, a producer or manager brings them on board. That's probably the most common way. In other words, you have an industry established person who that agent knows and has a relationship with who advocates for you. Oftentimes, this will take the shape of you're working with a producer on a project and you've done some drafts for them and you've proven that you're an easy to work with person. And that producer will say, "Hey, do you have an agent?" And you'll say, "Why no, Mr. Producer," or Ms. Producer. And Ms. Producer will then say, "Oh, let me get you an agent." And that's how it happens. Okay. So, yeah, no, seriously, that actually happened to me once. It's crazy. You meet them in person at Sundance or Slam Dance, something like that. I mean, lots of times the industry does show up at these big festivals, specifically to get drunk and glad hand and meet people. And if you're there, particularly if you've got a project in competition, so much the better. But otherwise, if you're just a really gregarious, friendly, easy to like person who's at one of these places, with a little bit of alcohol to loosen things up, you might wind up walking out of there with a connection to an agent. And that
All right,
agent,
let me just throw this in here. This does not mean go to a festival and get drunk. Please
mm,
don't do that. And
oh, come on.
yeah, and only, oh, play to your strengths.
Yeah.
So if you are very good at, if you're extroverted and you're very good at introducing yourself, do that. If you're not so good at this, or if it makes you really, really uncomfortable, you're just going to have to find other ways.
Yeah, some of us just kind of need to stick to words on paper, and that's perfectly fine. The other ways are you're involved with some sort of successful project that's being tracked by the agency in one of the ways we mentioned earlier, things that agents do actually track, and finally, someone influential champions you to that agent. Okay, that's really pretty much the ways in. Again, query letters occasionally will work, but for the most part, no. You'll have a much better shot with managers.
Yeah, and let's just quickly also talk about the fellowship programs. They're usually like the Disney Fellowship, Universal as a fellowship. There are lots of writing or diversity fellowships out there. If you can get into one of them, I highly, highly, highly recommend you do that. I mean, really gun for that, because by the time you get out of the fellowship program, you are on their roster and they will try to staff you on one of their shows. And the other possibility, and the other way, of course, is to make one of the big, big, big industry lists, like the Blood List, if you have a horror film, or the Hit List, or get great scores on places like Spec Scout. All right, so let's talk about why you should focus on managers instead of agents. Jim, want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody thinks that, agents and managers are interchangeable. Not true. The truth is that agents believe that it is the manager's job to find and develop new talent. Managers, well, that used to be way more true than it is now, but it still is kind of true, and we still have to follow that. So, in other words, that's really who you should probably be focusing on more than agents, because again, eventually down the line, the manager or the producer that you're working with on a project will bring that agent to board. Okay. Managers generally have way more time to work with you. As we mentioned before, they've got way smaller lists. That means they can spend more time nurturing you, working with you through draft after draft, taking the time to get something right. And if the manager sends out a piece of material to the town in some capacity or another, even if it's just to a handful of producers or whatever, if that script doesn't sell, they have the capacity to keep you aboard without dropping you right away. It's, again, not as cutthroat. It's not here on our bullet points. I want to just add hip pocketing. Hip pocketing is something that managers do way more than agents do. Hip pocketing just means that they take you aboard as an unofficial client. And that's actually a really great situation to be in. A lot of people think like, oh man, they didn't sign me. But actually that's great, because you have all the benefits of having that manager or that representative without worrying about being cut. So what that means is the person is taking a flyer on you. You're not quite there yet. Maybe you're not making money for them yet, but they're working with you to get you to that point. So if a real agent or manager ever offers you that opportunity, like, hey, I can bring you aboard, I can work with you, but I can't sign you yet, that's called a hip pocket. Go for it. All right. So back to why you should focus on managers. While they're still difficult to get to, they are generally more accessible. Again, they are the ones who are supposed to read the query letters. They don't often, but they do. In fact, at our last manager panel, several of the managers said that they did actually read queries. I know that Jake Wagner, who's one of the top managers in town, he still reads queries. He won't respond to most of them if he doesn't like them, but once in a while he does. They're not assholes like a lot of agents tend to be. it's sad but true. Managers just, I don't know why, they just tend to be nicer people. Agents, maybe because they have to, really watch their time, that they just tend to be more brutal. They just don't care. They're just, all about the business.
But
It,
how do we really feel about this?
yeah, no, I put a little asterisk there because, what happened was about 10 years ago, quite a few agents all got fired in the industry downsizing, and many of them hung up shingles or went to management companies and became managers. So they're managers, but they're still acting like agents in quite a few ways. I mean, the difference is, of course, they can attach on your project to produce, but they still kind of act like agents. Okay. Like I said, they won't necessarily drop you immediately if you haven't made the money in 6 months. They will often put together the team that he or she feels is necessary to get you out into the town and make people aware of you, introduce you, and prop you up and get you to the point where you can get a big studio deal. Oftentimes, to really sell a script in a big way, you will need to have an agent on board, and the manager is responsible for putting that team together. That often means not just finding the agent, but putting you with the right producer, working over with that producer over several drafts. Oftentimes, it means bringing an entertainment attorney into the picture, and putting that not package, but putting that team together. A manager will keep putting you up for things long after an agent has lost interest. And as I mentioned, when you're ready, an agent will often find you. And finally, and a manager will often spend a lot more time in projects that might be perceived as less marketable than an agent will. They still really want some high concept, ghost chimp MD or whatever that they that they, that they can go sell, but really at the end of the day, a manager will often roll the dice on something that's just a little bit more of a passion project. A quick anecdote. So a manager friend of mine, Jeff Belkin, he's on our manager panel from Zero Gravity. He was telling me about once he had this client who wrote this really beautiful period drama that he couldn't not represent. Okay, he couldn't not go too bad for. He called it his Sisyphus stone because he knew how hard it was going to be to get this thing set up. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the paydays on these things are much smaller as well. If you sell a big studio action movie or something like that, that's a nice payday for an agent or for a manager. But for a smaller project, it's a smaller payday, but you often have to do 10 times as much work. Well, it took that guy 3 years to get that project set up. He finally got it set up for a small payday, and he said it was so immensely gratifying, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience that he would never do again. Now, of course, I know he will because he's saying like, I'll never do that again, but he will if the right piece of material comes along. So I'm not so sure an agent will do that. I mean, unless it's a blacklist winning script, something like that. So let's move along.
Yeah, let's talk about plan of attack. In other words, what can you do? What should you do? So first up on the list is pitch fests. Now, I'm sure you've heard of pitch fests. You go there and you talk to someone, and often the person you talk to is the low man or low woman on the totem pole. That's fine because they will hopefully eventually move up in the industry, and hopefully you will eventually move up with them. Jim, I think you have an anecdote when it comes to pitch fests.
Yeah, well, a million anecdotes. I've been to a lot of pitch fests. I pitched at pitch fest back when I was up and coming, and had to be 20 years ago now. I met one of my oldest, best connections in the industry at a pitch fest. And this kid he was sent there. He didn't want to be there. It was mandatory. It was part of paying his dues as a new assistant at this production company. And I sat down and I was just like, "Hey, dude, how's it going? Hear anything good today?" And I just kind of showed him that, that I was cool. And we became friends, and I sent him a piece of material, and he called me up a couple of weeks later. He was like, "Dude, this is one of the funniest things I ever read." And this guy is now one of my best, longest connections in the industry. He's a producer now. He came up through the ranks. I wound up developing an animated project with him that we almost set up. Oh, it came so close, but I got so many meetings off of it. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So everybody, it kind of hates on Pitch Fest because so often you go there and it's expensive. It's often a waste of money, and it's really stressful to have to pitch to these guys. But things can happen. It's I always say that the best way to get in the industry's face is to literally get in the industry's face.
All right, then next up are queries. Now, what piece of material do you have that you want to pitch, and who should you pitch it to? Who should you query about this piece of material? Well, do your research on IMDb, on Netflix, who are the producers who are doing your material and setting it up? And also there's the Hollywood Screenwriting Directory, very useful source. So yeah, just look at who's doing your material and get a list together of people that might possibly be interested in that material, and then find ways to get that material to them. Now, there are also services, and let me just quickly state that we actually are not affiliated with any of these services mentioned here, and the list is by no means all inclusive. There are many, many services out there. So just look into them. We know that one of our clients recently had a lot of success with roadmap writers. He's not from town, so he did those video pitches, and then he came to town and he had like several meetings set up. So check out those services and see which one fits you or which one you can afford, and see how and if it works for you. And then, of course, we already talked about contests. Again, contests are expensive, so be judicious and, use the contests that actually have a good track record.
Tanya, let me just jump in real quick here. So let's just be clear. The main difference between queries and the services are queries are free. You can do that yourself, and everybody should do that when your material is ready. Don't waste your time querying the town until you've got something that is the bomb. In other words, third-party validation, not necessarily coverage, but obviously that's a great way to find out. But if you've got a screenwriting group, for example, or a trusted friend in the business, or just somebody who's really good with story, and these people are like, yeah, now you've got it. Then's the time to do your query campaign, okay? And just be aware, yeah, like 1 out of every 500 is going to hit. But if you write a really good query, you will have a chance. Tanya, you've had query campaigns through Virtual Pitch Fest where you've gotten two or three responses out of every 10 that you've sent out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just depends on how you present your material, and if they want to buy what you're selling. In other words, oh, this genre is hot right now. Okay, let me take a look at it. So that's basically what it comes down to.
Right.
Okay, so we've already talked about contests. Again, make sure that you don't waste your money on the whatever hole in the wall screenwriting contest that nobody cares about. We've already talked about diversity programs and fellowships. Well worth your time. Go for it. Now let's talk about DIY. Do it yourself and do the festival circuit. Um, so yes, DIY, the great thing about it is the barriers of entry for DIY have been lowered a lot with new technology. In fact, just 2 years ago, the first movie shot on an iPhone, Tangerine, was sold.
Tangerine, yeah.
Yeah, was sold at Sundance. So you have very cheap cameras, you have very cheap editing programs, so you can DIY it, and it gives you some control. So it's always a good thing.
Let me just soapbox here really briefly. So one of the things that we're doing here at Coverage Inc. is exactly that, because, while we're still, writing scripts and sending them out just like you guys, and, basically still shopping scripts traditionally in that way, at some point, you do kind of have to take the power back. And DIY gives you that ability. So whether you decide to shoot your own short or a feature or webisodes or musical, whatever it is, put it together and do it by hook or crook. Surely you know some friends who've got some equipment, and it doesn't need to be on a super professional level. Obviously, the more professional, the better. But if people spark to it, you can get attention, and anybody can make a film and put it and get it into festivals. If it's good, you will get kudos, and if it gets a lot of kudos, you can get some industry attention. That is something that you can do yourself just by willing it to happen. And even if you don't have money, you can do a Kickstarter campaign or an Indiegogo campaign, or hit up the Bank of Dad or whatever relatives or family members you may have available. So by hook or by crook, just go out there and do it. Don't just sit around waiting for someone to buy your screenplay. You will die a lonely death.
So let's go to personal connections. We've already talked about that. So if you have any personal connections, use them, but that's kind of obvious. Then we have also face-to-face meetings. And a quick thing about face-to-face meetings, because writers often don't feel up to the task of face-to-face meetings because they're introverts, which is why they like sitting behind a computer instead of interfacing with people. Who was it that sent his writers? What manager sent his
Emil,
writers? Emil,
Emil
yeah.
Gladstone, yeah, super agent Emil Gladstone, who is now a producer, great guy. But yeah, for years he was one of the top agents in town. And yeah, because writers tend, we tend to be neurotic and not really good with people. We live in our little caves. We don't play well with others. So, he sent them to acting classes specifically to learn to be good in a room. By the way, if you haven't picked up Stephanie Palmer's book, Good in a Room, please do. Unless you're one of those people who just naturally is gregarious and has no problem pitching, you know, it's great ammunition to help you, be to present your material because the words on the page are just 50% of the battle, folks. You have to be able to, be likable and charming and present your material well. So check out
Basically, what
that
it
book.
comes, yeah, and basically what it comes down to is they want to like you, not just like your material.
Yeah.
Basically, oh, I want to work with this person. I want to have a beer with this person, essentially, is what it comes down to. And the best way to go about this, to go about learning your pitch, is to actually practice your pitch before your pitch session over and over and over again. Grab your roommate and pitch to your roommate. Grab your aunt and pitch to your aunt. And the same really goes for other things like phone queries, for example. Now, again, this is one of those things where you should only do it if you're comfortable at it and if you're good at it. So if you have, if you can absolutely call up the assistant and have your 10-second elevator pitch. And if you are charming and you have a fresh new killer idea, they will listen to you. But again, this is one of those things that you should only do if you're actually comfortable doing.
Yeah, very, very few of us we know will be those people. But some people are just naturally salesy, and great. If you're fearless, make that cold call. You will get, any assistant will give you 10 to 30 seconds on the phone to listen to you. And if you're amazing, they might just take a flyer on you. It's amazing. It's incredible. But what you need to do is, in 30 seconds, you need to say, "Hey, what's up? I'm so and so, and let me just tell you in a couple quick sentences my project," and then just without waiting for whether they say yes or no, just hit them with it. And it's got to be compelling, and it's got to be tight, 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 tight. And if you can do that, they may just go, "Oh, sure, send it over. Let me take a look." You never know.
And then, of course, the last one, we've already talked about that. Write a great
Or a great
script.
script.
We will talk more about that in part two. So let's go to other strategies. Jim, want to talk about how to turn a soft pass into a relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. So, lots of times what will happen will be when you do get an acceptance on a query, a manager generally will say, send your script over. Then that manager reads it and, they're not really, they don't love it, so they pass. Oftentimes you won't hear anything back, but sometimes you do. Sometimes they send back kind of a non-committal sentence or two because they don't want to give you specific information that you can then argue with them about. So they'll just generally say, wasn't for me, or we have something like that in development already, which is agent or manager speak for pass, and I don't really want to tell you what I really felt. But what you can do, what the savvy writer can do is you can then try to, as the door is closing, put your foot in it and say, "Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time. And, if you could give me any specific notes, I would love to hear them because I really want to do everything I can to make this material better." Sometimes they'll respond and sometimes they'll say, "Oh, well, sure. Okay." And then if they do that, then you come back to them a few months later. Don't wait a week. Do it like 3 months later so that they don't think you're a crazy stalkery person. And you come back to them and you say, "Hey, I just wanted to thank you again. I implemented your notes and I sent my script out for coverage and it's way better now. I just got to consider it with reservations and I'm going to keep working on this script until I get that consider, and it's all thanks to you." And what you've done is you've now shown that person, this is cool. They listen to me. Maybe this is somebody I can work with. So if you do that over the course of time, you can turn what was a pass into a relationship. Now bear in mind, it is going to take like a year or two Sometimes it doesn't work at all. Sometimes they're just like, yeah, screw you, and you'll never hear from them again. But very rarely, and it has happened to me, you can turn that into a relationship. You just have to show them that you're cool and easy to work with. Another strategy is to, use a producer or an entertainment attorney to get you an agent. Um, Producers, especially smaller producers, tend to be more accessible. Okay, let's say you're writing a small, like an under $5 million movie. Okay, there's lots of producers who make those movies who are not serviced by agents and managers, so they have to look elsewhere to get their material. So if you query them, they may respond, or if you query their assistant, even better. Because again, their job is to read, and they have to put feathers in their cap. So if you meet with that person and they like you, and if you start working with them, generally unpaid, on either your idea or one of their ideas, which is more often what happens, they bring you in for a meeting, they like you, you impress them, they don't really want to do your script, but you say, hey, is there anything you've got going on that I might be able to help you out with? Or you say, tell me about your slate, and they tell you what projects they've got going on, and you say, I'd love to have a crack at something like that. And they might say, well, funny, the writer we've got on this right now just isn't doing it. And then you can wind up working on that project unpaid. You create a relationship with that producer over time. And then once again, when time comes, that producer will then make that call and get you representation. They'll say, do you have an agent? Do you have a manager? An attorney is another potential way in. If you do know or have an entertainment attorney who the town knows and trusts. It can't just be somebody who has an entertainment attorney from Terre Haute. Nope. If they're not in LA, New York, Chicago, London, you're not going to get anywhere with those guys. And lastly, of course, is if you can, move to LA and get a job in the industry. If you are in there in a production office every single day as a PA, fetching coffee or whatever it is, in any capacity, you will get to know these people. And if you show that you are a good hard worker, they will get to like you and trust you and depend on you. And regardless of what the job is that you are doing, everybody wants to be a writer, everybody wants to be a director, everybody wants to be a producer. And
Exactly. Now let's talk about things not to do,
yep,
because that's it can be quite damaging. So, for one, argue with a pass. You don't want to be this person who writes emails or calls up going, why did you pass on my script? You don't know what you're doing. Please, please, please do not be that person. Do not do this. And people have done it. Way too many people have done it. And also, do not be a pest. Don't stalk these people. Don't come to the office every day. Don't call them 3 times a day. Just don't. Don't try to approach several people at the same place with the same script.
yeah,
Um,
all coverage goes on file. So the first thing that they would do is just look up once you send in something to another manager or another agent, they'll just look in the computer and they'll say, "Oh, we already read this."
exactly. And also, don't lie, because it's a very small business. Uh, it, People know if you lie, or people can easily find out if you tell a lie, because it's a very, very, very small business. Don't stalk him. Don't show up at their grocery store or at their home or any of these things. And
Oh, I
people
have to
have
take
done this.
issue with this one. Come on, no stalking.
I know. And don't send out your scripts too early. And that's
Oh,
actually something
please.
that happens so often. Just please, 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 please make sure your script is ready. And I mean, the thing is, it's happened to many of our clients, in fact, even though we've asked them to please, please, please don't send the scripts out too early. People we've sent to agents, we said, okay, your script is almost there. Let's work a little bit more on it. But I don't have the time. No, please, just make sure your script is as good as it can be. And the same thing goes for your pitches. We've had several instances, for example, where we sent someone to a manager, and we said, okay, make sure you have at least 8 to 10 other log lines, other ideas that you can present to these people, and run them by us first so we can give you input. And if they did that, usually it went very well. And if they didn't do that, usually it did not go very well, because we know our manager panel, we know what they respond to and what they don't respond to. So in other words, if you have any sort of resources, use them.
Let me just jump in real quick here. Believe me, I understand when it comes to sending out material early. I'm the king of that. I did it for frickin' decades. Okay, look, it's when you're a writer, you finished a piece of material, you're excited, you're like, yeah, I got to show this to somebody. Great, maybe you do a draft, maybe you do two drafts, and then you're like, all right, let me send this out and get some reactions. But it's hard to fight that impulse. It really is. But the truth is, you really have to. Some of us might nail something in a draft or two. And by the way, screw you if you're one of those people. I hate you. No, no, seriously. For the rest of us, it takes lots of drafts. Okay. 20, 30 drafts is not unheard of. Just ask Jordan frickin' Peele. Okay. His Get Out went through something like 34 drafts, and he didn't even find like the big hook in the movie, I think he said, until like draft 18. All right. So you have to embrace the process.
Okay, and of course, always be a cool person. We've talked about that ad nauseum. So just be easy to talk to, easy to work with. Jim, want to talk about ageism? Just
Oh,
because,
no.
of course, please, it doesn't, it doesn't affect me. So I need you to talk about this.
It doesn't. Yes, it doesn't
Yeah,
affect you yet, but it
yeah,
it
right.
does affect me. And no, ageism sucks. I really don't want to talk about it, but it is a real thing, guys. And if you're, 40s, you're still pretty much okay. I mean, it's a little tenuous, but once you're over 50, like I am, and God forbid 60 or 70 or 80. It definitely becomes tougher. You can forget being staffed on a TV show if you're over 50, unless you're already broken in or working in the industry. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. The big exception to that is if you come with some amazing industry, not industry, some amazing experience, life experience that is crucial to the story being told. For example, you are, a former 20-year district attorney. Well, yeah, they're going to want you on this one particular show that's about a 20-year district attorney. So if you've got that incredible life experience in whatever field it is, use that experience, bring it to the table, whether it's your pilot or, it is possible to be staffed on a show as, kind of a graybeard, the elder statesman in the room. But in general, just sort of bear in mind that a lot of development executives are in their 20s. And, if you're in your 50s or 60s and you go into that room, they're going to be looking askance at you like, what is this person? And, please don't make Beatles references. Don't reference things that they don't know what that is. Just bear in mind that, yeah, ageism is real. Here's how you counter it. You need to be the best damn writer in the world. That's it. If you are freaking amazing, and if people read your script and they have no idea that you're 75 because your writing style is just so explosive and your voice is so amazing, then you know what? You've got a shot. You've got a shot. But you have to be better than everybody else.
All right, let's talk about what to do if all else fails. Basically, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's quite self-explanatory. Always have a script, a new script that you're working on. By the way, the one thing that will get you dropped, even from the nicest manager, is not producing any new material. They expect you to have 2 to 3 new scripts every year. So
That's
work,
what
work,
kills
work.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the number one thing that people do not anticipate. That is the number one reason why agents and managers will drop you is for not writing. Don't expect your agent or manager to keep pounding the pavement trying to sell one script for like 2 or 3 years. They'll take a shot with it. If nothing happens, they'll go, oh, the town didn't respond. And you have to say, okay, great. I've got this other thing I'm working on.
Yeah, so basically it mostly comes down to a writer writes. So write, write, and write. And there are don't doesn't even matter what format it is, but write, write, write. There are writing classes, there are workshops, utilize them because it's also a way to make connections. Again, you can make connections to other writers. At some point, those writers might get staffed somewhere and they might bring you with them. And even if that does not happen, it's still a place for you to practice your craft and get better. And of course, then you have writers groups, you can have co-writers, you can get to improve your script analysis, of course. Target something that you know is hot right now, a genre. Produce a movie yourself or work on improving your voice. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in part 2. But basically, it comes down to write, 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 and write. So, okay, Q&A for part 1. Feel free if you have any specific questions. Feel free to type them into the chat box. We will happily answer them.
And
Yeah,
by the way, in part 2, we are going to talk specifically about how to really bring it on the page so that you can be that talent that people can see from 10,000 feet.
yeah, okay. So questions. Hi, Cam. What does a low-level assistant want to learn from a query letter from an unsigned, inexperienced writer that might make them take your screenplay to their boss?
Okay, so let me take that one. That's an awesome question. First of all, just FYI, guys, we do have a free query letter service. There's no upsell or anything like that. So if you do write a query and you want somebody to put eyes on it before you send it out, just email it to us. We'll take a look and we'll tell you exactly what to do. But in a nutshell, 2 things. You need to present yourself compellingly. That's the piece of the puzzle everybody forgets. Okay, you need to paint an amazing, fascinating picture of yourself, as well as paint an amazing and compelling picture of your material. And you need to do all that in a few sentences. Every word counts in a query letter. So if you are querying, let's hope you are querying a lowly assistant or somebody real low level, because again, those are the people who do have to read and they do have to prove themselves. So that's actually a really smart strategy rather than querying, the highest level people at a company. So yeah, so query that assistant and say to them, hi, I'm so-and-so. Tell something really fascinating about yourself. What's something about your life experience that's really fascinating or different? And a guy said to me once a couple of years ago, he's like, well, there's nothing really interesting or fascinating about me. I'm just a plumber. And I said, just a plumber? Dude, come on. You can't find a way to create something really interesting or fascinating about your life experience of being a plumber? Of course you can. Be self-effacing, be clever, be caustic, be smart-assy. Bring that voice on the page. Do it in a sentence or 2. And then let's say your project is about a plumber who, while he's fixing somebody's toilet, a clog in a toilet, and he finds a cut off finger in there, and there's a mob guy's ring on the finger, and he's like, oh shit, now what do I do? And next thing he knows, he's got hitmen coming after him, and feds are coming after him, and what the hell is he gonna do? He's got to use the power of plumbing to fight back. Yeah, okay, that's a terrible idea, but but the point is, if you do something like that in a query letter, you are using your life experience. So just paint the most compelling picture of yourself possible and do it with economy of words, which is something I am not doing right now.
All right, next question. Location. Is New York still a place from which to make movies? Depends. First of all, there are some some great places in New York where you can find. I'm originally from New York. Where
So
you
am
can
I.
like. Yes, that's true. Some great filmmaking collectives where you can meet up with people. New York at various times also tries to give tax breaks. I don't know if they're in a tax break phase right now, but basically any place where you can find people who also want to make movies is a good place to make movies in, especially if we're talking DIY. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we shot our first short film we shot in New York, and it was a really wonderful experience. I've made movies in New York. I came up in New York making low budget movies. So let's be clear. The difference is New York on the low budget or the indie side, wonderful. Some amazing filmmakers in New York. There's an amazing, vibrant, creative community in New York. It's just a great place to make movies. But in terms of selling stuff to the industry or big Hollywood movies, studio movies, all of those things come out of Los Angeles. Even if they're made in New York, they're still sold in California, made in New York. Okay, so it's really a dichotomy between the two coasts. But yeah, if you want to be in the studio game, you've got to be in LA. If you want to be in the indie game, you can do pretty well in New York, especially indie documentary, anything that's not big studio movies.
All right, next question. How do you get a low concept screenplay noticed? Stories like Lady Bird or Manchester by the Sea, or even Boyhood minus the 12-year filming gimmick, right? Well, with those, because with like Lady Bird or Manchester by the Sea is that they're in Boyhood, they're auteur movies, so you have a very well-known director slash writer or slash actor attached, and that's how they get made. So how you get noticed, especially with low budget dramas, is a contest win. One of the big contests would be fantastic. Or, even if you have a manager who champions the script and says, oh, wow, I really like this script. It's not the most commercial there is, but I love this script. So I will get behind the script and try to get it made.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's now bear in mind that getting that manager is going to be really rough with a non-high concept piece. Again, managers are really at the end of the day looking for things they can sell, just like agents, and getting in with that person is going to be rough. So what you're going to be, it's going to be execution dependent, and you're going to be dependent on getting some love from festivals, from contests, from industry lists. And those are the ways you're going to get those people to pay attention. I mean, if you just query, if you cold query even the nicest manager in the world with projects like that, you might not get a bite. So it is incumbent upon you to to get that feedback that will compel these people to read your material, and that is in the form of validation from contests. And I know that sucks. I mean, other than DIY or make a short. That's another thing. Proof of concept. You could proof of concept it, and if that's really really great, then that could lead to the feature. All of those are potential ways in with this type of material, but you need to accept the fact that low concept material is going to be a tougher sell than a high concept piece of material.
All right, next question. Any tips for how to use IMDb Pro to look for managers that might make sense to query? Should you avoid managers who have X number of clients already? Jim, you want to take that?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't actually use IMDb Pro to query managers generally. I mean, you can. I think of IMDb Pro more for producers, but um, okay. So there's couple questions there. The first is I would probably use the Hollywood Representation Directory, which is this great book. I think it's only about 20 or 25 bucks. You can get it on writerstore.com. A great place to get all of your screenwriting goods. We have no affiliation with them. We're not getting a kickback. Okay, but please pick up a copy of that book. It's this big, thick directory. It's got every manager in town listed in there. It is a wonderful resource. In some cases, it even has their emails. I mean, it's all there in one place. It's so much better than IMDb Pro. And what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry, I forgot.
If they have a lot of clients already.
Oh, a lot of clients already. No, absolutely not. Look, because that just means that they'll have assistants, and those assistants will be on the manager track and will be coming up, and they have to read, or the assistants might have assistants. So, the really, really big management companies like Industry and and places like that, yeah, they might have multiple levels of assistants and interns as well. So, yeah, that's fine. They're all going to be reading. And again, it's their job to find new material and nurture new talent. Okay. So, yeah, querying that high level manager or that high level agent might not get you anywhere, but querying the assistants for sure.
All right, next question. I'm working hard to get a couple of projects to consider. Is a coverage rating of consider with reservations for both script and writer enough to send a query letter out, or is it too soon? It's too soon. Basically, I know you want to send out your material. I can totally relate. I'm the exact same way. But look at it this way: you don't get too many at bats. So you want to put your best foot forward. People always remember a first impression. So
Yeah,
don't don't send it out too soon.
you want that script to hit like a bomb blast when it arrives on that person's desk or monitor or whatever, you know. So consider with reservations, that's awesome. If you've gotten consider with reservations and consider with reservations for both script and for writer, that is phenomenal. It means you're so close, so close. Why would you not go the extra 10 yards to get it into the end zone?
Exactly. Okay, next question. I've heard that it's best to focus query letters on a specific script rather than on your body of work. But what, if anything, should you include about yourself, your brand as a writer? So, first of all, yes, you are correct. Focus on a specific script in your query letter and include about yourself whatever is a great sales point about you, like what makes you stand out.
Yeah, if there's something really quirky or weird or just fascinating, something that you've done, like, let's say, you went to visit the Dalai Lama 10 years ago and you had tea with the Dalai Lama, that's really unusual and fascinating. People might want to hear about that experience. Put that in there, and it's just so weird. People might think, why did they mention that? You want to try to create something that will lead people to inquire more of you. And yeah, never pitch more than one project at a time. Never ever. Don't ever do that, guys. You've got 10 seconds. Okay, when an assistant or an agent or a manager or whoever opens that query, well, not an agent, when whoever opens that query, you've got 10 seconds. They're going to read the first couple of sentences. If those first couple of sentences present well, they will read your pitch. If there's more than 3 paragraphs on that page, they're not reading it. It's an instant delete. Okay, never pitch more than one project at a time.
All right, next question. What are great scores for the blacklist? Well, let's first distinguish between the blacklist and blacklist.com. I mean, of course, they are related. However, the blacklist is the annual list that what are the scripts that the industry has really, 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 really loved to read. And so those scripts on the blacklist you as an unrepresented writer aren't going to get on because the way it works is that agents and managers send out your script to the industry, and from those scripts they cull what they really really like and that end up on the blacklist. But with great scores, I'm assuming you're referring to blacklist.com. So basically I think you have to be in the upper 10%. Jim, correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Yeah, guys, we don't actually use Blacklist. And we're not affiliated with them, and we've never put anything up there. So I have no experience with it. I can't tell you. I don't know what their scoring system is. I've heard that something like a 7 or an 8 is a great score for Blacklist. I have no idea, but just go onto their site and you'll be able to figure that out pretty quick. And we should probably move on to part 2, Tanya. Maybe one more
Yeah,
question.
I think we are. I think we are pretty much done with questions. And if
Cool.
we are, again, if we, oh, we have one more that's actually very interesting. Does ageism also affect feature writers, filmmakers, directors? Yes. I'm sorry. Sorry to be so blunt, but unfortunately, this business, out of whatever reason, thinks the younger you are, the more in tune you are with what people will pay for, what people will buy. But again, your age is not something you can do anything about. So,
Well, let's clarify that if you're breaking in. Okay, so yeah, it's not all that relevant if you are, if you've already done some stuff. Then you can be, what? How old is Ridley Scott? 127.
at least.
So yeah, so it doesn't really matter that much if you've already established yourself. But yeah, if you're an emerging director and you're 68 years old, I'm not going to say you can't do it, because if you make a great movie and it gets a lot of attention at festivals, you might get some attention specifically because of your age, in which case that could work in your favor. People love to say, see, look, I'm not ageist, I'm working with this person. So, never say never, but the prevailing wisdom is, yeah, it's just tougher, mainly because a lot of the executives, so-called executives, are in their 20s and 30s.
Oh yeah. So I mean, again, DIY would be a good way for you to go. Yeah, DIY to show them you can do it,
Yep,
and yeah.
prove it.
All right.
Proof's in the
All right.
pudding.
All right. We do have a few more questions that unfortunately we're not going to get to. However, you all know in general how to get in touch with us. So if we did not get to your question, just email us at info@coverageinc.com. You
And
can
we will do
always
another Q&A at the end of part 2 also.
Exactly. And again, with any questions that you have, you can always email us. You know that we don't charge to answer your questions. So just email us at info@coverageinc.com if we did not get to your question. So now let's go to part 2. How can I make my screenplay or pilot stand out? So, yeah, as you can see, a lot of scripts that go out there, they don't suck, but they're mediocre. And let me quickly throw this in here because a lot of writers have a hard time understanding that. Um, the rules that apply to you are very different than the rules that apply to someone who is already in. If you're already in, it's like, yeah, we know this person. You can hand in mediocre material and it will get sold, it will get made, you will get staffed because you're already in. If you are breaking in, it's a whole different ball game. If you're
Yeah.
breaking in and you're breaking in without connections, you're breaking in and you don't have an aunt, a mom, or dad, a sister in the business, it's a different ball game for you.
Yeah, Aaron Sorkin can write a 180-page first draft. We can't. That's the simple reality. Okay, so let's talk about some things that you can do to give yourself the best possible shot of getting an agent or a manager to actually pay attention to your material. So there are certain things that they look for. One of those things is genre. If you're writing in a genre they can sell, that's kind of what they're looking for. Okay, there are opportunities for stuff that's not exactly considered marketable. Sure, if it's and if it gets, I'm sorry, I'm losing my ability to speak. If it gets really, if it's well appreciated by the town, if it wins awards, something like that, then yeah. But otherwise, they're really looking for something they can sell. And let's start with genre. Here are some genres that are traditionally easier to get people interested in: horror, supernatural, not slasher. Okay, supernatural horror is a studio movie. They can sell that. Slasher movie or serial killer movie, those tend to be lower budgeted things. They're not really interested in representing those movies because there's not a big payday there. Now, you can write them and you can sell them yourself for maybe $2 or $3 million, but will they get you represented? Not really. Um, Thrillers, always, an evergreen. Action movies, not as popular as in the 90s, but yeah, you write a great action movie, especially if it's a fresh action movie, not just a rehash of, a Schwarzenegger movie or something like that, some new spin on an action movie, absolutely. Um, Contained sci-fi. Contained, tell them what contained means, Tanya.
Well, contained basically means you have a limited amount of location and it can be made on a budget. So you
Yeah,
don't want to do, the space battles that will cost you $250 million.
writers always forget about budget. You need to keep in mind that while we all see Marvel movies and they're all really exciting, the studios are not going to spend nine figures on a piece of material that does not come from source material. So if you write this big sci-fi epic movie, no one's going to make it. I mean, it could potentially work as a writing sample if it's great, but if you write something that's contained, it can be done on a space station or, just a small cast or something like that. Think Moon, think Her, movies like that that are more about the concept, Ex Machina, something like that. Then people will fall in love with you because not only is it cool and cutting edge and sci-fi, but it shows that you understand, the economics of the business. And four quadrant anything, The Incredibles is a great example, but look at A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place, huge hit movie, great movie. That could have easily been an R-rated movie, but they smartly decided to make it about a family. And so when we saw the movie, there were 7-year-olds in that theater watching the movie, and fantastic. It was a PG-13 movie. It made a boatload of money. It works on multiple levels. Four quadrant. What is four quadrant, Tanya?
It means old and young, male and female. Basically, you want to write a movie that everyone can go and see.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Now there
So
are
let's
other.
quickly but let's just I'm trying to move it along. Sorry guys, because I think we are keeping you guys quite longer than we intended to. So other genres that can sometimes get attention if done well. Let's talk about comedies. One side note about comedies, they were a lot bigger in the 90s, especially when it comes to the rom-com stuff. Like Jennifer Aniston did a gazillion of them, and they have completely fallen out of favor. And why have they completely fallen out of favor? Because the DVD market is dead. In the olden days, if your movie didn't do too well on the box office, at the box office, you could still you knew you could make your money back selling DVDs. However, now with streaming, DVDs are dead, and what's really, really, really important now to make your money back is foreign. And so how much money you make in Europe or Asia is really, really important. So people, some humor does not translate as well. Humor that will work in one culture does not necessarily work in another culture. Hence, a lot of comedies have fallen out of favor. And so, character based comedies or comedies that are big, kind of slapsticky, where the humor is in your face, can still work.
Adapted drama, either true life or from public domain fiction, possibly. Let's say it's a true story of something that happened in the 1960s about a group of people, something like that. A really compelling true life story. Yeah, if well executed. Again, execution dependent. But having that source material definitely helps. A true life sports story, definitely. People will be interested in that. People love a good underdog story. The key two words there are true life. If you're writing a fictional sports story, I hate to say it, guys, no one cares. It's just a truism, all right? If your baseball movie, your football movie, whatever, please base it on something that actually happened if you want to have any chance of people reading it. I don't know why. It's just that's the way it is. And lastly, in this category, the affordable contemporary drama or dramedy. People love to find that little golden nugget, that little Miss Sunshine, that Room, that Short Term 12 that can be done affordably, that has great roles that might potentially win awards.
Yeah, and again, but in this case, especially when it comes to drama or dramedy, you do want someone to champion your script, like a
Oh
manager,
yeah.
or you can get it attached. You can get a star attached or a director attached. That would be fantastic for this type of movie.
Here are some things you shouldn't write. Rom-coms. Yeah, rom-coms are just considered stale, stale, stale. And Big Sick made money. That was great. Trainwreck made money. Both are great movies. But still, the prevailing wisdom in the industry is they're just stale. Nobody wants them anymore. You have to find a really new way into one for anyone to be interested. Westerns, they're just not rewarded at the box office. They still keep making them. They make like one every year, comes out, hits with a thud. Nobody cares. It's tough to get your Western read. Um, Huge budget fantasy adventure movies. These things come from source material. Please do not write an original 9-figure epic fantasy adventure movie. Okay, it has to has to be adapted from a book or some other source material. Otherwise, no one's going to put up the money. It's just another simple truism. If you really do want to tell that story, write it as a book, and then maybe you can adapt your own book if it finds an audience and is successful a year or two down the line. Superhero movies, again, there's so much source material out there. Why would anybody be interested in an original superhero? Plus oversaturation in the marketplace right
And
now.
let me just quickly cut in here. Please do not do the following. Take Superman or a Batman or any other Marvel or DC superhero and put them in your script. And
Yeah.
yes, please, you do not have the rights to that, and it happens more often than you'd think. Do not use anything in your script that you do not have the rights to. All right.
Black comedies, nobody wants them. Sorry, any sort of quirky Terry Gilliam-esque type of thing, just real tough sell. And of course there are exceptions. I mean, Charlie Kaufman broke in, and he's brilliant. You know, uh, musicals, do it as a play first, put it on stage, and then adapt it into a screenplay. There have been some musicals that have sold recently, actually, which is really unusual. And period drama is the toughest thing to sell. They are expensive. I mean, you'd think that they would be easier to get set up because they do make them all the time, and they're Oscar bait. Actors love to do them, producers love to do them. They win awards, they're prestige projects, but they're just considered by the industry as just a really, really tough sell, and perception is all.
And also, they will not usually do something from an emerging writer. Again, a period drama is something that needs a well-known writer or a well-known director and or a well-known star.
Let's say you love writing period drama. Is there a path for you in the industry? Yeah, absolutely. Write TV. Write a TV pilot. Write something that uses those skills but does it in a contemporary way. Like take a contemporary character and then put that person back in a period dramatic setting, a fish out of water sort of thing. There are ways to do it.
All right, let's talk about TV since we are in the era of peak TV. Now, Jim, you just recently interviewed our manager panel. What did they have to say about TV?
I did, yeah. So I'm doing an article for the Wrap, which is going to come out in a couple of weeks, and we talked about a lot of stuff like the state of the spec market and stuff like that. And I was interested because I was reading an article on the Good in a Room blog about that it's just impossible. Stephanie Palmer maintained to sell a TV pilot. And that kind of I bumped on that a little bit because I do know people who have sold pilots. So I put that to the panel, and everybody said, yeah, you can sell TV pilots. They are a tougher sell than features, and people still love features better as writing samples because they do show your ability to tell a whole story from beginning to end. But you can still sell a pilot. An emerging writer with a brilliant pilot can sell it. Okay, so don't think and also because of the rise of streaming, and there's so many people out there looking for content. Don't think you can't break in on that side. You can. It's still considered tougher, interestingly, to sell a pilot than it is to sell a feature, even with all those streaming channels looking for material. But most of the people who are doing those things are known quantities.
All right, so let's talk about the originality and voice, the two things that no matter if you're writing a TV pilot or a screenplay are really, really, really important for your material to stand out. And a lot of writers often make the mistake to try and be somebody else. In other words, they really, really admire this writer. And again, if you really admire a writer, read all of their scripts by all means, so you know how they're doing it. And I think when we first start out, we all start out imitating other writers. That's how you develop your own voice. But at some point, you just have to be you, not trying to be somebody else, because that is the unique thing about you is you, and that's the thing they're going to sell. So develop your unique voice and don't be safe. Don't go, oh, well, I think I just took this webinar and they said I should write a thriller, and I really, really hate thrillers, but since that's what I need to write, I'm going to write a thriller. Don't do that, because there are hundreds or thousands of people who are really into this genre and hence will be a lot better at this than you are. Write to your strengths.
Yeah, mediocrity is the enemy here, and that's really the reason why it's so difficult to get the town to pay attention, is because there's so many writers out there clogging the pipes with mediocre scripts, which is why it's so crucial that to get people's attention, your stuff needs to be sparkly. The reason why we're focusing, by the way, on voice in this next chapter here, or whatever, in this next section is, obviously character is really important to your screenplay. Structure is really important to your screenplay. Everybody knows that, okay? Nobody talks about how important voice is. And voice and subtext, which we'll get to in a second, are two of the most important things that hardly anybody ever talks about. So let's talk about voice and why it is so important, okay? Voice it's kind of a catch-all term. It's used to describe basically, a writer's panache, how you bring it on the page, your style, your je ne sais quoi, the uniqueness of your approach. And like Tanya just said, we all kind of start off, emulating our mentors, and that's fine. I stole liberally from William Goldman, and I still kind of do a little bit. But the truth is, eventually, if you find your own voice, then that is what the industry loves. That they're looking for a unique and sparkly voice. Okay, two people with really distinctive but strong voices that we mentioned right here. Charlie Kaufman. Okay, Charlie Kaufman writes really, really out of the box, crazy stuff, but he's really, really grounded still. And all of his stories follow the hero's journey. So it's not just like he's writing, following his muse and writing whatever the hell he wants to. There's a really strong structure at work showing that he knows his stuff. And then within that context, he spins these beautiful stories that are just absolutely, not anything that you would ever be able to anticipate and expect. Maybe not for everybody, but what a voice on the page. Then on the flip side, Vince Gilligan, one of my favorite writers as of right now. Vince Gilligan, when you read a Breaking Bad script, or one of Vince's scripts, I mean, it's like it's like having a drink in a bar with a really cool hip friend, like your smartest friend, who's kind of down home and homey, and you can relax, and he's really chill, and you're just hanging on his every word because he is such a good storyteller. That's what it's like reading a Vince Gilligan script. Okay, two completely different voices, but boy, when you read them, you feel so comfortable because that voice overwhelms you, it overtakes you. That is just a wonderful thing to aspire to. Boringness and ordinariness are the enemies of voice. And so often we get scripts in that are pretty decent. It's a decent concept, a decent idea, decently executed, but it's just kind of laying there on the page, and that's the enemy of voice. Um,
All right, let's keep going to being safe. I think a lot of writers often are worried about being seen as weird or just somebody that's crazy. Yeah, don't worry about any of these things. So one of the people in our management panel is Lee Stobby, and he had just recently had a huge sale to Netflix with Bubbles. Now, Bubbles is the story of Michael Jackson told via the point of view of his pet monkey.
I
Whew,
love that.
I know. Anyway, it was a huge sale to Netflix. It's, I believe, in production now, and Lee is very proud of it.
As a
Right.
stop motion animated movie of all
Yeah.
things, and this undisclosed figure, but it sold for eight figures. It was an eight-figure sale to Netflix. One of, if not the biggest spec sale of all time, completely out of the box. So Lee will tell you, and he has told me, and he'll tell anybody, the more out of the box, the better. He is not looking for just, a decent story, well executed. He doesn't care. He wants something that is going to, just be so bizarre and brilliantly different that it gets attention specifically for that.
All right, next up, throw monkey wrenches into your writing. Basically, what that means is everyone, the audience, and especially people in the industry are very savvy. They've seen it all. They read scripts all day long. They watch movies and TV all day long. They've seen it all. So try to find something to surprise them, something they did not see coming. And also, whatever genre you're writing in, always remember there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of other scripts out there, and at least tens of thousands of scripts in whatever genre you're writing in. So know what the conventions of your genre are, and then subvert them. So, for example, we before we mentioned Trainwreck. Well, romantic comedies are pretty much dead, yet Trainwreck still was a romantic comedy, and the fresh thing that Trainwreck brought to it was that they switched parts. So the male became the female essentially, and the female became the male part. So whatever know what your conventions are, and then you must subvert them.
Fantastic example, and yeah, totally. The you have to understand that people have ADD in the town. They've read so much. They know what's going to happen in your screenplay long before you do it. Everybody's following the save the cat paradigm, which doesn't mean don't follow it, by the way. We worship at the throne of Blake Snyder, but the point is, surprise people, go in directions people do not expect. If you can punch someone in the face, like boom, then they'll go, whoa, cool, and you've won them over.
All right, let's talk about choosing our words because often as screenwriters, we are so focused on plot and dialogue that we totally forget where we can really show and shine and show what we can do and shine, which is the action description. So often you have screenplays. He stands, she sits, he runs, she walks. Yeah, just don't. Basically, just don't. Go through your script and scrutinize every sentence and every word and find the most interesting way to say something and the way that really shows off your own personal voice. And by the way, humor goes a very long way.
It sure does. Guys, we're writers. We are writers. Okay, the whole point of doing this is we're supposed to love words. We're supposed to love the sound of words and how they intermix together. And so often we'll get screenplays where the verbiage just lays there. Read people like Harlan Ellison, fantastic sci-fi writer, where every word choice is delicious. You need to bring that love of the language to the page. You need to say things in different ways. Use really interesting verb choices. Say things in unusual ways, but don't be so abstract that people don't know what the hell you're talking about. Okay? Use the fact that you're a writer to impress people. That's the whole point of being a writer.
Exactly. And then trim, trim, trim. I mean, we all love our words. That's why we're writers. And we have a very hard time editing ourselves. There's this famous quote, which is, writing means killing your darlings. So sometimes you just have to kill your darlings because your script will be better for it. So cut.
Ruthlessly, cut ruthlessly. It's probably the number one problem we see with scripts coming in is they just need an edit pass, which doesn't mean go back and cut all the essential words out of your sentences so they don't make sense. There's nothing we hate more and the town hates more than when you can't figure out what the writer is talking about. Don't leave the subjects out of your sentence. Please write grammatically. Okay, but it does mean look for the bloat and cut the bloat out. Think like a film editor. Think like, look at every paragraph and say to yourself, I've only got 10 words to say this exact same thing. Can I do it? And challenge yourself to do that.
Exactly. And remember, you have to have conflict in every scene. Don't ever tell somebody, well, my characters are just kind of talking here. Yeah, don't. Nobody, especially not in a movie or TV script, is ever just talking. The person always, your character always needs to want something. And what they want needs to be very important to them.
And if there's no conflict, manufacture it. However you need to do it, get it in the scene. As as they taught us at UCLA when I was in the program there, if you've got two characters in a restaurant and they're just having a simple conversation, and they're agreeing on everything, then have that waiter be the most inept waiter ever, who's screwing up their order, or the people behind at the table behind them are having an argument and creating difficulty. You need to that creates conflict. That creates a situation for them to have to deal with. However you can, bring the conflict.
And now let's talk about character specific dialogue. Here's the thing, we all sound different. No two people sound alike. I mean, maybe if they're part of the same family, they will sound very similar. But how you say things, how you express yourself depends on where you're from, what school you went to, how what are your hobbies? Are you using lots of sports analogies or are you quoting literature? Do you have any regional accents or dialects? What is your prior experience? So no two people sound alike, hence no two characters should sound alike.
Your viewpoint. This goes back to voice, and it's very important. you may already have a viewpoint when you write, and if you don't, if you're kind of neutral, think about maybe adopting a viewpoint. For example, hip cynic, that's a great viewpoint. I like to use that as well. When you're kind of like smarter than everyone in the room, or at least want to have people think you are, um, bring that on the page. Okay. I'm not saying, have too much internal commentary to the readers in your action description. You can do a little of that. That's fine, but don't do too much. But the point is, you can bring an attitude in the way you say everything, and then that becomes part of your voice. Another one is gentle professor, or just the noble storyteller. There's ways into that where you can craft an identity for your voice, even if you don't naturally have one. Think about, like, oh, what's the best tone for the way I'm telling this story?
Exactly. And the most important thing is subtext. Very often we see scripts come in where it's, every character says exactly what they mean, exactly what they think. Well, I feel like you're doing this to me, or I really want you to say this, or I really don't want you to do this. Now, in real life, we simply don't do that. Often we don't say directly what we mean, and it still comes out in the way we act, in what we do, in our body language, or even in the stories we tell.
So, subtext, as it says at the top, as important as structure or character depth. I've been told by several people in the industry several times, and I agree with this, that subtext is how you separate the wheat from the chaff. You can have a pretty well-written screenplay, but if the subtext is not there on the page, it's not, no one's going to champion it. What makes people fall in love with your writing is the subtext. It's the crucial difference. It is that thing that makes people go, yes. All right. So how do you bring it? How do you do that? Well, you need to think about what's going on internally, what your characters are thinking about in any given scene. What are they not telling the other person? Everybody's got secrets, right? So what are they not saying? And are they expressing that somehow, through sarcasm or eye rolls, body language? Body language is so crucial. Or are they clearly using metaphors? Okay, let's give an example right here. So I'm not going to read this dialogue, but in the first example, we've got a pretty flat exchange between an army lieutenant and a private, who's the army lieutenant is just giving the private an order. Okay, yeah, it just kind of lays there flat, right? But now let's look at that same scene. We add a little bit of body language to it. Okay. So instead of just the army lieutenant barking an order, give me a thousand peeled potatoes, not 999, 1,000. And then the private shifts uneasily and he says, yes, sir. And the army lieutenant stares daggers at him. Okay. So now by adding those two little bits of direction there, which is body language for both of them, we're adding some subtext. What additional information do we now know about these characters that we wouldn't have gleaned beforehand? Well, maybe the lieutenant has his eye on this jackass. Maybe he's a troublemaker. Maybe he's fed up. Maybe the private is planning something and is about to pull some prank or revenge or something. There's a million ways you can go with this. So in other words, just adding that body language conveys a whole separate level to the scene.
Exactly. And of course, there are other ways to convey subtext. For instance, using metaphors when two characters talk about something as a stand in for what they really want to say. And then we have shows like The Office or Breaking Bad, which are fantastic when it comes to subtext because they have subtext in really every single scene. So you always know what their agenda is and what's going on. And an audience usually likes that because they're put into a superior position. They know this character is now lying to this other character, or they know that this character really wants a whole different thing. So that is usually fantastic to have.
Yeah, when
And
the audience is in on the secret or in on the joke, the characters on screen are not. That's such a powerful position to put people in. It makes people feel good when they're reading something or watching something.
Exactly. And the same goes with Rileys, as they're called, parentheticals. You can use them because the private, really, the words are not the intention.
Riley's, yes. I want to talk just a little bit about my film school, which was UCLA, but of late was Breaking Bad. Um, and The Office too, in a way, which is the reason we mentioned both these shows. They're both so great in terms of subtext, but I want to talk just really, really briefly about how much I personally feel that I've grown as a writer just from watching Breaking Bad 3 times all the way through, and then going back and watching all the commentaries on the DVDs. Because by learning how they construct these scenes and the agendas of the characters and what's being said and what's not being said in every single scene, it was like a light bulb going off for me. And now I can't write anything without being aware of subtext. I always used to be aware of it, but it was always difficult for me. But now I finally feel like I got it. Subtext is not easy. We all think we get it, but when time comes to actually executing it, it's one of the toughest things. It's deceptively difficult. So I recommend, if you're a fan of Breaking Bad, go back and watch the whole series through again with keeping an eye out specifically for subtext and watch the words that are being said in the scene versus what's really being said in the subtext. Even in The Office, where every single scene for 9 seasons, 23 episodes per season, there was subtext in all of those scenes. Generally, the subtext was, I am really in love with this other character and I'm having trouble getting with this other character. I wish they'd see me for who I am. And they ran 9 seasons on that. What a brilliant show.
All right, let's talk about show, don't tell. Okay, visual writing. So that's what people very often forget. We are writing for a visual medium, film and TV. So you might not need this entire scene you've just written if you can convey whatever it is that you're trying to say in a shot. They're of course, the cliche examples. You pan over a wall with a lot of newspaper cutouts, and hence that gives you everything that you need to know about the character's backstory. That would be the cliche one. Or
It might
you
be a cliche, but it works.
it works. Yeah, exactly. It works. So basically, you never want to have a scene where a character says, well, I did this in my life, and then I did this, and then I did this, and I feel like this about this, and I think this and this and that. So do not do this. Also, never, ever, ever, ever write anything where you could put, as you know, in front of the dialogue. Just don't. If it's an as you know speech, as in one character tells another character what they normally would already know, and it's just done for the audience or the reader's benefit, that's a no-go. Just don't do that.
The reason we're hitting this hard here, guys, is, we're not just giving general screenwriting advice, although we are, but specifically, this all goes back to the topic. This is what the industry looks for, okay? Visual writing, writer's voice, subtext. These are the things that you are judged on. Nobody tells you this stuff, okay? But visual writing is a key one because we, as writers, we always tend to use dialogue to get out our exposition. But are there ways to get out exposition visually? And if so, yeah, the answer is always yes. And if so, do it. Look at Jurassic Park, the Mr. DNA animated sequence. Okay, that was pure exposition. So how did they get that out there? Through a little 3-minute animated cartoon in the middle of the movie. And you know what? It was great because it was visual, it was clever, it was funny. Anytime, like Tanya said about the bulletin board, Electric Horseman did exactly that. The old pan over the bulletin board trick, and we knew everything there was to know about Robert Redford's character in 2 minutes. Get that information out there visually, however you can. Children of Men, another great example. Look at the first 10 minutes of Children of Men. We are never told what the situation is in that world. We are shown little vignettes, little pieces, and by piecing that all together, we kind of get the idea, oh, we're in a dystopic near future world with terrorist attacks and crazy crap going on. And by the way, they did the old pan over the bulletin board shot in that movie too.
Exactly. So another good one is the so-called Pope in the pool. Let's just quickly mention that. So if you have a scene that you kind of have to just get exposition out again, uh, it works if you do it in a way. For example, what was the Pope in the pool movie? Two characters were in the pool, right? And the Pope was swimming laps. Which
Yeah,
movie
yeah.
was
So
that? Yeah.
no, I don't think it was in a movie, but it was in Blake Snyder's book, Save the Cat, and he said, excuse me, well maybe it was in a movie, I don't know, but the expression "Pope in the pool" refers to, there was a scene where it was two Vatican officials who were having a conversation. I don't know about what, but it was an expository, fill the audience in type of scene. So how did the writer make that visually interesting? By staging it in a visual way. So they put that scene in the Vatican pool, and the Pope is swimming laps in the background through the whole scene. Now that's something you don't see every day. The Pope swimming laps. We're not used to seeing the Pope out of the usual popey context.
Yeah, but
You
was
know.
he wearing his hat? That's what we really want to know.
Well, it's a flotation device, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So show, don't tell. Show, don't tell.
You will
Very.
be judged on these things, folks.
Yes, you will be. And it's not quite a wrap yet because we actually do have a Q&A period coming up. So this is just our summary of everything we've talked to today. And by the way, we are very sorry because we kept you about an hour longer than we planned, and we are terrible at this. We just talk, we just talk way too much. Oh my God.
Yeah, I've got to stop talking. Sorry. So let's sum it up real quick. Okay, don't waste time or money querying people or submitting to contests or fellowships until you're certain your material rocks. Don't clog the pipes with mediocre scripts. Do yourself a favor and do another draft. Keep working on it until you are confident that it rocks, and then go do your query campaign. Then hit the town. Then use the paid services. Get it out there, whoever you can. When you're ready to go, figure out your best strategy for how to get it out there. We suggest targeting managers and like-minded producers first. Okay, find producers who've made movies or television shows similar to your project. Target those people, or better yet, target the lowest rung person on the totem pole at those companies, because again, those are the ones who have to read. Those are the ones who have to get feathers in their cap. And if they find a piece of material that's really cool, they can go to their boss and say, "Hey, I just read something." And then if their boss likes it, then they get patted on the back and they get promoted. So that's good. Use pay services as needed. Virtual Pitch Fest, Stage 32, whatever. We haven't talked a lot about Stage 32 and roadmap writers, but basically they're video pitching. They cost a little bit of money, but a lot of people have been getting signed through them. We think it's kind of like the Pitch Fest of the future. So if you can present well, set aside a little bit of budget and go for it. And if you can't present well, then do Virtual Pitch Fest, which is basically just query letters that you have to pay for, and but you're guaranteed a response, and they do target industry people. And I will say, I personally have been signed from Virtual Pitch Fest. About 6 years ago, my manager had actually left the business. I was between managers, and I did a query letter campaign through Virtual Pitch Fest, and I got signed to Roar, and that led me to subsequently being signed by Gersh. So it works. Tanya, you want to take the rest?
Sure. Basically, the important thing is for you to not give up. Even if you get a pass, if it can be a soft pass, if it is a soft pass, like what we've talked about before, don't, kind of lose the connection to this person. Just be gracious, be easy to work with, and say, thank you. If you have notes, please give them to me, and then get in touch with them again a few months down the line. And write, write, write. Again, you can't only have this one script that you've been working on for the last 10 years. Always work on several projects at once. I mean, as you know, when you send a script out for coverage, it'll take a week or 2 weeks until you get the coverage back. So don't just sit around waiting for the coverage to come back. Map out your next writing adventure.
Remember, the
And
number one reason that clients get dropped from managers is not writing something new.
yes,
They expect you to write 2 to 3 new original pieces of material per year.
yeah, and also get your get your surroundings set up the way you need to. In other words, with people who are also in the industry, who can support you, who can critique your work, find like a class or a writers group, just people who are also in the industry
Yeah, you
and
don't need
can
to
help
pay for
you.
coverage.
Yeah.
Coverage is a great tool, but get smart feedback any way you can.
Exactly. And work on voice and subtext. And coming to our questions, if you have any questions about part number 2, voice, subtext, or any of these things, uh, please send them to us. Also, if we don't get to your questions now, or if we didn't get to your questions before, feel free to email us info@coverageinc.com. We are always happy to answer your questions, and we don't charge you for answering your questions. So please utilize us. Also, we would like to know from you if you found this webinar helpful. If you did, we're going to do more of them. If you didn't, we are not going to do more of them. So also let us know if there are any other subjects you would want us to cover, or anything you'd want us to do differently, apart from talk less. We know that we talk a lot. Our webinars are way too long. We already know this. So yeah, feel
I
free
like
to.
talking.
I know I like talking too.
Okay. And you guys, thank you all of you for listening and participating. I hope we've given at least some pieces of information to you. There's no magic bullet to go out there and get signed and get represented. There's just lots of strategies and lots of putting one foot in front of the other. You need to do all of them, and you will eventually find something that works. It's a lot easier, however, when you've got a great piece of material. It still may not be instantaneous, especially when you're submitting to contests, because lots of times people who read for contests are, just interns, or they're not being paid very well. They don't really pay that much attention. But it will happen. When you've got something that's really, really great, you will get discovered. The cream does rise, just not necessarily on your timetable.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing for you to remember is this is really not a sprint. This is a marathon. So we know it's very easy to get discouraged and to get frustrated, of course, but don't let that, you know, prevent you from doing what you want to do. And yes, we got. It would be helpful to hear more about subtext in a future webinar. All right, we will do that. Thank you so much. And
That's a great idea, because yeah,
yeah,
that topic, obviously we just sort of glanced over it. Which is the most we could do because we already were way over on time. But yeah, we could easily do a whole webinar just on that in the future. In the meantime, there are books out there. There are great articles online. Avail yourself of them. And just keep practicing. Just make like little exercises for yourself. It's real simple. Just doesn't have to be in the context of even a script you're writing. Just say, okay, like assign yourself. Okay, I want to do a scene where a cop just pulls over somebody and they're having a conversation, but there's more going on here than meets the eye. What is that thing? Write that scene. That's a great exercise for subtext. Do they maybe know each other? Do they have a past relationship? What is going on there? So just challenge yourself to do that, and you'll find yourself finding ways to get these things out there. Just a little look can say so much at the right time.
exactly. So again, if you have any questions we did not, we just had one quick question that came through, so let's quickly cover that. My ultimate aim is to write in TV, 1 hour, typically drama or dramedy. If a manager likes my initial idea and asks, "What else do you have?" Is it okay to show them another 1 hour drama and a movie? Will the movie turn them off?
Of course not. No, that's fantastic. Nowadays, everybody crosses over from movies to TV. The wall is gone between those two things. So, yeah, if you've got a feature and a couple of pilots, or a pilot and a couple of features, fantastic. It's all good.
Exactly. So again, if you have any other questions that we did not get to today, or that you haven't thought of and will think of later, feel free to email us at info@coverageinc.com. And
Oh,
again, yep.
I'm sorry. Let me just add one additional thought onto there, onto what I was just saying. Unless it sucks. No, seriously. Okay. Now, obviously, I'm saying that in a very snarky way, but what I mean by that is truth. Okay, we all have stuff on our shelf that sucks. I've got probably, I don't know, 50 scripts that I've written that suck, really, and a handful that are okay. Uh, you know, don't give them the stuff that sucks. Really, it's another way that people kill themselves without even realizing it. Because lots of times you get in the door because they read something and then they like that piece of material, and hopefully that piece of material is, probably your best piece of material. It's something you've worked really, really hard on and honed and finessed to get it to the point where you get that you get that person to read it, and they read it and they go, huh, what else have you got? Which means I'm interested, but you're very rarely going to get signed off just one piece of material. They want to see consistency. And then you send along something from your back catalog, which you did maybe a couple of drafts on back in 2006. And well, I'm sure it's still good. No, it's not. It's not still good. Don't send it. Really, if you are in that situation and you do not have something that you are equally confident in, do not send it. Wait until you have honed and polished something. The door will stay open until you close it by sending along a bad piece of material. All right. So take the time. And if you need to buy time, a couple of weeks or even months, just email that person back, that manager or whoever it is, and say, absolutely. I'm finishing a follow up right now. I just need a little bit more time. I'll get back to you shortly. And they'll say, cool. And then whenever you've polished that second or third piece of material you're going to send them, then you send it to them, not before. Because I have seen this time and time again. The door is open, and then boom, the door hits you on the ass on the way out because the second or third piece of material did not get it done.
All right. Again, always feel free to email us. We like hearing from you. We really do. And we're always happy to answer your questions. We really are. So
Thank you,
feel free.
everybody.
Thank you. And so sorry to keep you an hour longer than we planned. All right. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.